Well, hello there, everybody. Hope you guys are having a great day. Hey, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about the second of our fundamentals of high quality teaching, and that is going to be, well, goals. Having student centered, student led goals, but not individual student goals, goals for the entire class. We're going to talk about why that is the most bang for your buck, why that brings a change in the academic atmosphere, how it gets everybody involved, how it actually provides opportunity for a lot of underachieving types of students. Those are often class clowns, how it provides them opportunity to change their behavior, it kind of highlights, it feeds into it feeds the behaviors you want. And, it rewards those students that do the right things the right way. It makes everybody kind of seek those people out, makes them leaders of the class, and, well, good results follow. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Before we do, I would like to just real quickly revisit something we talked about in the first session, where we talked about having a purpose of your class. I need to make it clear that, we discussed last time about designing a purpose of your class, having a purpose of your class. But the thing I want to mention is that most likely there's more than one purpose to your class. You're going to have a very utilitarian purpose, of course. The purpose of this class is to learn these things. Boom. You're also going to have the more classical liberal education ideas. The purpose of this class is to expand the mind, to give you a platform upon which you can develop problem solving, and you can practice communication and civil discourse and all those kinds of things. But there's also going to be all kinds of things in between. And that's really a fantastic and wonderful thing, because every single student's going to be bringing their own baggage, if you will, into your class. And by having more than one purpose, but having them all well defined, you're going to appeal to, hopefully, every single student that's there. So I just wanted to bring that up, make sure that, it's not just one purpose. It's not, this is the only thing that we're doing in here. There's lots of things happening in a classroom. And, but it's worth the effort to make sure that each of those defined purposes is really vetted by you, that it's explained, that it's made transparent and explicit to your students and probably their parents, administrators, and counselors, that everybody knows what it is you're doing, why it is you're doing it, and how it all fits together in the big picture of things. And so anyway, I hope that last one was useful. It's funny. Well, I'll leave that for later. Anyway, let's get on to today's stuff, right? What we're going to be talking about today is having class goals, a goal for the entire class. We're going to talk about how to set one of those up, why that is probably where you should start, not with the individual student goals. And we're just going to unpack all of that, and hopefully that'll bring some cohesion and a very positive culture into your classroom, an academic culture into your classroom that's very uplifting and positive, and where great things are happening, where students are doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. And all of those kinds of things. So anyway, let me share with you let me share with you an experience, a transformational experience that I had as a teacher, that really made me realize how important it was to have a classroom goal. So it all started originally, this whole classroom goal and this classroom experience, instead of just focusing on the individuals. It all started where after each assessment, I would do a class breakdown of the grades and the performance. So we would chart the numbers of A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's on a bar graph, and we would put that week's quiz average and that week's class average, and maybe a note. Maybe I noticed that homework was really poor that week. And we would do this every single week. And so over the course of the semester, people could chart and see how they're progressing, how they're not doing so well, and as an entire class. And what ended up happening is I began to realize that if a significant portion of the class was underperforming, it really did hurt the grades for all of the students. Whereas when everybody's on board, everybody gets brought up. So that kind of planted the seed, and then it kind of really, blossomed with this short story I'm going to share with you here. So the context for the story is that I teach this 2-year college preparatory class called Cambridge IGCSE. It's for 9th and 10th graders. And at the end of the class, the students take a test, and it allows them to demonstrate if they are, in fact, college ready or not at the end of 10th grade. So it's a pretty difficult class. In a lot of countries, in a lot of parts of the world, that's what's used, kind of like how we use our ACT or SAT scores. The failure rate is pretty high, but I think it's appropriate. In the United States, it's around 20% of students pass only. So about 80% fail, but that correlates pretty strongly with the percentage of freshmen in college that are required to take remedial math or English, sometimes both classes, which is around 80%. Now, some of those numbers are kind of changing, but I think there's some hooey going on. There's some colleges are doing some funky things just to increase enrollment and to limit failure rates, just like what's been happening in high school, and it's really. Well, we'll save that for another conversation. But so anyway, here in Arizona, my home state, it's only around 10% of students that participate in the test pass, right? So it's a difficult test. Now, this has been so the cohort I want to talk about had grossly underperformed. I've been teaching this class for quite a while now, and each cohort, they do the 9th grade year, and they take a series of 3 tests at the end of 9th grade. And then they take 4 tests at the end of 10th grade. Math is the 2-year course, so they take it for 2 years. They don't test in 9th, they do test at the end of 10th. But this cohort underperformed compared to what was traditional for our school's outcomes. They had underperformed in their 9th grade year. And 10th grade year, things weren't going well. In fact, they were going pretty terribly. Had a very high failure rate. For just the class grades, things were really ugly. Students were... some were just avoiding challenges. Some were just being lazy and not doing, diligent work. And others were just completely checked out, doing nothing at all. Things weren't going well, and I was really frustrated. So I had to have the good old come to Jesus talk with the class, right? And it went something like this. I explained to them that they had underperformed, that they weren't living up to their potential. They weren't challenging themselves. They weren't going to get anything out of their high school experience that was going to be meaningful to them as adults, because they were just getting by. They were just doing the minimum. And that's not what this kind of class is all about. And I didn't believe that underperforming was a fair representation of what it is that they had to offer. But what we have to offer is what we do offer. That's it. It doesn't matter what you could offer. Potential doesn't matter. Potential's worthless. It's meaningless. Even mothers don't really think much of potential. They don't care. If a mother says to their child, "Hey, I want you to clean your room," they're not satisfied with the knowledge that the student has the potential to clean the room. They want the room cleaned. It doesn't matter. They want the performance. They want the outcome. So I shared this with the students, and then I set the goal. I made it very personal, but I called them out. I called them out, and I made it personal in the way that I suggested that the way that they're conducting themselves now is not going to be something you're going to look back on with pride. In fact, they're going to have a lot of regret. And I know that personally because that's how I did high school. So I told them I wanted to help them flip that script. I wanted to change it. And I explained how we're going to do it. And I told them that I believed in that group. And my goal for the class is I wanted everybody on the Cambridge test, the IGCSE test, I wanted everybody to get a B or higher. A C is the minimum passing score. I wanted everybody to get a B or higher. Now, I knew we had a mixed lot in there. We had a few students that were misplaced. And I didn't believe that as many students would respond as did. So anyway, I laid out the whole series, how we're going to do this, mapped out what we're going to be doing and when, and how that's going to help everybody to, develop and approach at least that B. And I was really stunned by the results, truly stunned. I mean, I had the previous 3 years, I had 100% of my students pass. This year, I did not have everybody pass, but I was still more blown away by this group than the previous 3 years. I had one student that failed. She got a D. Now, she did nothing until just a few weeks before the test. And so she failed. She fell short. But she approached me. And we had a pretty frank and sincere conversation. And I really do believe that she did learn a lot from the experience and that she's going to respond from the failure. And so I'm actually perfectly okay with that outcome. In fact, I believe it's better that she got that failing grade than it is that she somehow squeaked out a passing grade, having done what she did. And so I'm okay with that. I had only 2 students that got a C. And both of them I was stunned with that because neither of them really belonged in an advanced class, in an accelerated class. It's not that they can't be successful people, and it's not that they can't go to college and do well, but just where they were developmentally at 14 and 15 years old, they were way behind everybody else. So they squeaked it out. To their credit, they worked really hard. And they made a lot of personal changes in how they approached the class, and they got a passing score. So that means that they're ready to go to college. They can handle this. And in our experience, the students that do pass that class when they go to college, they kill it. They do really well. There's any issues that come up have nothing to do with academics or the student skills. They're very well prepared. In fact, a lot of people that just get that minimum passing score of a C on the Cambridge test, the IGCSE, they test out of all of their math classes that are required for liberal arts degrees. So that's a really fantastic outcome. Now, everybody else got a B or higher, but there were only 4 Bs, just 4. And some of those kids that got the Bs, they never believed they could get a B on that test. There were tears when those results when I gave the results back to the students. And by the way, I don't grade these tests. I don't even see them. They're shipped over to, Cambridge University, and they're graded by the staff that works on the Cambridge International Project. And then in the beginning of August, the results are released to us. And so I give the results back to the students. They're no longer my students. They're juniors, but they come see me and we talk about it, right? So anyway, 4 A's and then, 4 B's and then 11 A's and 4 students got this grade of distinction called an A star. That basically means that, to earn an A star, that means you're in the top 1% of students internationally. So that's a pretty special thing. Very, very few American students score in that category. It's not uncommon that there won't be any American in a given year that earns that. And so I had 4 that year. But here's the killer. Man, and I wished I had been able to reach these students earlier. Of the A's, there were 4 more students that were within 3 points on a 200-point test, within 3 points from getting that A star also. We could have had 8. And each one of those 4 had underperformed. They were probably the people that instigated my need to have that come to Jesus talk. But I did the whole goal thing. I did the whole class goal. I approached them as a group because it was the group dynamic that was unhealthy. It wasn't any individual student on their own that was acting out. Many of them were acting out, or maybe not acting out. Maybe that's not the right way to say it. They were underperforming. They just weren't doing what it is was expected of them and what was required to be successful in the class. But it was an atmosphere thing. It was a culture thing. It was an interpersonal dynamic. And so having a group goal was really, really powerful. So now the goal I had set, it wasn't specifically a SMART goal. SMART, that's an acronym: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And I 100% subscribe to the efficacy of having a SMART goal. When you have a goal, make it a SMART goal. Have all those elements there. If you don't know what those are, I'll leave a link so you can read a little bit more about SMART goals. But But the goal was, it was, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound, but it was also aligned with the purpose of the class. And when we mapped out the goal, when we mapped out how we're going to be doing it, the students understood that each expectation that placed upon them aligned with the purpose of the class, and that aligned with this goal. And so it was it was focused, and it brought everybody in. So I kind of want to unpack how goals like that work. So, I shared the story with you and kind of the genesis of the story with the grade charts. But I want to kind of unpack my understanding of why this works, okay? So I'm going to break this into a few different components. The first is the old saying, a rising tide floats all ships. I'll say it in different ways, sometimes raises all ships, whatever, right? So rising tides float all ships. So one of the things that happens in a classroom is you've got kind of a conflict in a way. You've got those motivated, high-achieving students that are pulling one way, and they're influencing all of the students, and they're moving in one direction. And you've got the class clowns, or the guys that are, maybe they're screw-ups, maybe they're, I don't know. I don't want to just judge them for their behavior in class. I was one of those students. There's always something wrong. There's always something going on. Not everything's perfect. And it might be that they just don't understand the purpose of the school, or they don't see how it fits in a meaningful way in their lives. But whatever it is, they're distractions. They're distracting everybody from the purpose of the class, and they're pulling the class in another way. And then you got everybody else that's kind of in the middle of just following, right? So you got these leaders on the extremes pulling one way or another. So one of the things that happens when you bring everybody in is everybody's going to be pulling in one direction, because everybody's going to come on board. I'll explain kind of how that works, right? Here's one of the fundamental, another transformative experience I had, or exposure I had, was to a man named Sugata Mitra. He did maybe you've heard of some of his work. He had what's it called? He had like a computer kiosk in these slums in India, and then he started putting them all around the world and just doing experimentation on how people learn, how kids learn, and the role of a teacher, and trying to gain some insight. One of the things he said is that kids learn what they want to learn, and they learn it together. And one of the messages is that the role of the teacher is not to control the learning. And it's not just to disseminate information. I mean, especially today, it's the information era. Nobody's struggling in school because they don't have access to the information, right? The role of the teacher is to encourage and guide. We set things up, and then we help the students through it. We coach them on how to go through it, right? And so one way that a whole class goal develops an academically minded community is that it tells all of those guys that are typically struggling that not only are you included in this goal and in this class, but you're actually expected to do well. And that's a true expectation. It's not like I'm demanding it of you. I really expect it. I know that this is something that you are capable of doing, and you're going to do it. I expect you to do it. You're not going to do it because I'm telling you to. You're going to do it because that's what we're all doing. And you're part of us. So when the students are kind of exposed to that, they have a new expectation on them, they can kind of change. See, one of the problems with class clowns, one of the reasons it's hard to get those disruptive students to change their behavior, is we actually expect them to misbehave. In our hearts, we actually expect them to be a distraction, and we treat them that way, and they're on that path, and we help keep them on that path. We're not actually providing them a new avenue, but by placing upon them this expectation of academic performance, which will not occur with also the misbehaviors occurring, they have a way to change, and that alone sometimes is a really powerful thing, and a really powerful motivation for those students. So when the students understand that this dynamic is occurring, that they've been a class clown so much that the teachers expect them to be a class clown, but now the expectation is truly different. We're not going to be clowning around anymore because now we have a goal and everybody's involved. And what ends up happening is those students start changing, and then all of the other students start to find this mutual self-interest in the success of everybody. So it's in my best interest to help you. Because when you do better, I do better. When we all start doing better, we are all pulling in the same direction instead of just having, the high achievers pulling one way and the underachievers pulling another way. And so the benefit is really fantastic because it does incorporate absolutely everybody. The kids that are just kind of quiet but low achieving, maybe because they don't have the confidence, maybe they're kind of lazy, maybe they don't feel that the hard work required to be successful is worth the effort. Maybe they don't think the payoff's there. Whatever the reason, those kids become greater, more motivated to get on board and to start working. And everybody starts helping everybody else. And as you progress and you start monitoring this progression and you start going through these checkpoints, where, at each checkpoint, if you've been successful, it's not that you're guaranteed to be successful overall with your major goal, but if you're successful at these checkpoints, that means you're on the right path to being successful, right? You're most likely going to succeed. As we start going through all of those things, it kind of builds this momentum and it starts to snowball and behaviors really change in the class. And it really does change the climate. It changes the culture of that classroom, makes it very academic. It makes it in a good way, kind of homogenous, that everybody's got the same exact purpose for being there. It means something specifically different to every single student. The top achieving students, they're working for one level, whereas maybe the kids that are really struggling, they're working for another level, but it's still success relative to them. So anyway, I'll leave that there. Okay, so now there's also this element that kind of goes with that of this positive peer pressure. See, by having this whole class goal and also teaching the students about the social and community dynamic that's at play with learning is a social activity. We learn together. The positive peer pressure becomes a really powerful influencer and motivator. For example, the two students in that story that earned a C, after a couple of weeks of having this goal and seeing the dynamic at play and seeing everybody getting on board and everybody rising up, these two C students, they hadn't quite gotten on board yet, but they started to realize how everybody's going, where this is headed, and they started attending after-school tutoring. And so that was one of the key differences. They had to start changing some of their behaviors in order to change the outcome. And so it was really a fantastic thing. That social accountability it has to be there. So in this goal, and same with the charting of the grades, there is a social accountability. It's not intruding on anybody's privacy. It's not saying, oh, Johnny over there, he's the rotten apple. It's not that. But, man, it works. It works. Everybody knows who's doing the job, and everybody knows who's not doing the job, even if you don't share it. But when you share it, man, it does put a positive pressure on students. I know that can be a little controversial. Some people think you shouldn't pressure students. They're made perfect. They don't have to change. I completely disagree with that. I think pressure is a good thing. I think kids aren't fragile. They need to develop, and developing's hard. Change is hard. All right. So now, anyway, one of the other things that happened with this whole class goal that I don't think happens when you do individual goals is students develop they develop independence from the teacher and this collaboration, this interdependence on one another. So the whole group starts to work together and support one another, and they really start taking ownership of the learning and the behavior in the class. They start to reflect upon their levels of engagement as they start to realize the negative impacts that distractions play. And so, for example, when they're reviewing a quiz or a test or even homework, you as the teacher can kind of instigate that initially. You can go over with them and you can say, hey, how many points did you lose on this test because of silly mistakes? You just weren't paying attention. You didn't read the instructions. You were going too quickly. You were distracted by something else. And how did that affect your grade? If you didn't mess those up, what would your grade have been? And then you could ask them, well, how many points did you miss because of something you really don't understand? So even if all those other things were in place, you still would have messed this up. Now, why don't you understand that? What was in place in class, or what wasn't in place? What was happening that made you mess up? Made you not get those? And then you have them record those things on the front of their quiz. You make 2 columns, one on the left. They write the things that are the behaviors on the test-taking skills they need to be careful of, or maybe some of the pitfalls they are prone to, falling for. And then also on the other column, write the things that they need remediation with. And of course, once you start doing this, and the whole group is doing it, the students will start doing this on their own. And they start pulling in one direction. The entire group is going to start working towards that common goal. They're going to help each other to perform better because they're really, really going to start to see how the success of their neighbor does help them. And it's really a fantastic thing. They start to take this ownership of everything. They start to self-select these groups. They start working together on their own on certain topics. Like, they have that column, hey, I need to work on this. So I would see, and I've seen ever since when I do similar things, I've seen where students are talking afterwards and they say, who had trouble with, whatever, radical expressions. And they'll form a small group and they'll bring in somebody that is seen as an expert, and they'll bring them in. They'll start making use of the resources like the textbook, the old quizzes, the homeworks, the internet, of course. And then when they come to me with questions, the questions are fantastic. It's very obvious. It's very obvious that those questions are well vetted, that they're very thoughtful. And it's not I don't get it or I'm not good at this. It's so much better. So now, let's talk about one component that you need to have in place as the teacher, because it's really going to help keep everybody on track. It's going to help them to stay focused because, they're young. We're talking about dealing with developmental children. They're at a developmental age. They're a little soft upstairs, not quite done. They need to go back in the oven for a little bit, right? They don't have the staying power and that focus to really follow through with a long-term goal. At least most of them. They need some help. So one of the things you need to do is you need to design and plan a series of steps with some gatekeepers, some checkpoints. Now, I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but what a checkpoint would be is, it's like it could be a quiz or a test leading up to the final event. Probably needs several along the way. And if the students are successful in that checkpoint, then what it tells them is that what they're doing is correct. It's going to help them achieve the goal. They're on the right path. Because they were successful at that checkpoint, as of right now, if they continue on this path, they are most likely going to be overall successful in accomplishing the goal. However, if they have fallen short and they're not being successful at the checkpoint, they need to go back, fix some things, change some behaviors, maybe learn some things that are unlearned, that are confusing, or things like that. Maybe some of that needs to happen, but there also needs to be some behavioral changes, because whatever behaviors on the student's part that led to that confusion need to be remedied. Now, of course, this is all assuming that the instruction's rock solid and clear and all those things, but we're talking about student development, not crafting perfect construction. That is super important as well, but that's a different conversation. Right now we're talking about making the students, helping the students to become better at being students, and using these checkpoints to help them along the way. So these checkpoints are absolutely important. They need to be known ahead of time by the students. They need to know what the checkpoint is, why it's important, what it means, if they're successful or not. In the story I shared with you, the checkpoints we did, there were two types. We had our homework and we had our quizzes as we were learning new materials and things like that. But we had 2 major checkpoints. One checkpoint was past exams. So students would take a past exam and we'd grade it and review. And then that wasn't quite the checkpoint. The checkpoint was the second time we did it. We do a different past exam. And if they had improved, then at that checkpoint, they would be deemed as being successful. They still might not have the grade they want. Usually the grades on those first exams are very, very low, but the hope is that they get better at the material, they get better at the test taking, they go back and they start reviewing some of the things that they're shaky with, and they develop. So if the grades from one test to the next are improving, the student's developing, and that checkpoint they would have passed that checkpoint, they're on the right track, you see? And then we did another where I would make these short quizzes that would focus on some difficult topic from the past, something that they really had trouble with originally that they need some work on. And so this quiz would do two things. Number one, it would really motivate them to learn that thing, and then it also would give them the feedback as to how well they have learned it. And those are good checkpoints too. By passing all of those, then they're showing proficiency with the topic. So anyway, the checkpoints can be determined by you however you want. I think weekly quizzes are a great checkpoint. And I think when you evaluate that checkpoint, you got to look at two things. You don't just look at, hey, what did you miss? And, you don't just look at the mechanics of what went wrong. You also look at the student skills. What did the student do to contribute to this struggle? What could they do to improve? And you just pick a couple things that you can help those students with. And that is starting to develop some individual goals. But when you're doing as a whole class, some of those things start coming out naturally when you start having these whole class conversations about those kinds of things. So anyway, the checkpoints, super, super important. They're not deterministic. They're just a predictor. And they can be used to encourage people to keep doing what they're doing, to pile on a little more, to accelerate that. If they have a gentle upward curve of improvement, we can use this checkpoint to increase that curve so they start improving more quickly. And if the students aren't on the right track, this checkpoint's like hey, buddy, let's slow down here. We need to reevaluate how things are going because all of the effort you're putting in right now is not yielding the results that you want. So let's take a look at this. And then you start to, redirect. Excuse me. So because of that, the checkpoints they're a must. They have to be there. Those aren't really in the SMART goal, but, I did not come up with that idea on my own either. I stole it just like everything else. But anyway, that checkpoint is super, super important. So anyway, when this is all done, when you get these goals set up, it really changes the dynamic in the class. Number one of the things that the goal does, the whole class goal, it puts you in the same boat with the students. It's not you versus them. We are trying to help everybody get here. And we are helping everybody here. Everybody's included. People generally fulfill the expectations that are set upon them. We're social creatures. It happens. That's how we work. And so by having that true expectation that we're all going to do well, it's going to motivate a lot of reluctant students to come on board. It's not a be-all, end-all. It's not a cure-all. I mean, there's some students that are just, for whatever reason, and it's usually, they usually have some pretty serious problems. They're not interested in or willing to engage in school. And that's unfortunate, but hopefully we can bring all of those kids on board and get them to, to participate. And as more and more start pulling in the same direction as the strong kids, as the leaders, those other reluctant ones start joining faster and faster and faster. And pretty soon, it truly is harmonious, and it is so much easier for you as the teacher. And the students are performing at such a high level, and it's really quite an amazing thing. And they're taking ownership. And as I mentioned, when this kind of thing really takes hold, you're no longer going to hear kids say, I just don't get it, or I'm not good at this. I mean, maybe if they're frustrated, they're mumbling to themselves, but it's not something they really believe, and they are better equipped to respond to the challenges because they're expected to do well. And so they find ways to do well instead of finding reasons that, that failure is predetermined. Because a lot of that, especially in math, I'm a math teacher, a lot of the reasons students fail is because they truly believe that they're going to fail. And a lot of people expect them to fail. They get it at home. I just wasn't very good at math is what their parents will say. I couldn't pass math, things like that, right? So by having that expectation for the whole entire class, it really does change the atmosphere of the class. It changes the way that students engage with each other, with the material. It helps them to be receptive to some of the coaching on student behaviors that needs to occur. And even if the overall goal isn't achieved, even if it's just close, even the students are just close, if they've gone through that path and they're developing and they're getting better and now they have a positive trajectory, that's still success in my book. So anyway, That's it. Let's wrap this up. Look, these are just my ideas. A lot of, I mean, they're battle tested, right, in the classroom. But that's what works for me. And before I was on, before I had these ideas, I had other ideas that I replaced. And it could be that in the future I have some more ideas. Maybe you have different ideas. I want to hear from you. If something resonated, let me know. If something in this episode resonated with you, leave me a comment, send me an email. thebeardedmathman@gmail.com is the best way to email me. I'll leave all the contact information in the description down below, but I do want to hear from you. If something I said is, well, it doesn't sit well with you, if you totally disagree, I want to hear from you. Civil discourse is a lost art. It's something we seem to tend to avoid as a society lately, and I'd like to change that too. I don't want to do that. I want us to be able to disagree in a respectful way where we're not serving our own interests of being right, but we're actually serving what is right. We're trying to gain deeper understanding. So I want to hear from you. I want this to be a discussion. I want to get people involved. I am being challenged to put these things together, and it's forcing me to really reflect and do some extra reading. And I want to learn more. And I want to help you guys learn more. My ultimate goal with all of this is I want to improve education by redefining the role of the teacher, redefining how a teacher engages in school with students, with counselors and teachers, other teachers and parents and administrators. I think it's needed. I think the time is now. I think the time's right. And maybe I'm not the one who instigates that. Maybe I'm just the one who barely starts it, and somebody else gets lit on fire and they have a better set of tools to push it forward. But I think it's the time, and I'm very excited about it. So I want to hear from you. I want to get people involved. So please like and subscribe and share so it'll grow, so the word can get out there. Because maybe, as I said, I'm not the person to do this, but maybe some of the things I'm sharing will land on the ear of somebody that is the right person for the job, and they do it. And I'd be happy for that too. So anyway, I hope this finds you well. Hope you're doing well. Everybody's safe, happy, comfortable. Well, comfortable's nice, but not really required, right? Anyway, and sometimes uncomfortable's better. But anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. And until next time, I will talk to you guys later. I hope you have a great day.